I sure hope it's not lying to me. All right. So what we're going to talk today about is a little more of a practical application of what do you do if it's an open house and you know, under the new rules, for lack of a better way of putting it. First of all, I just want to say, and I'm repeating some of the things that Leo and Kendall and others have said, is that most of us don't agree with the whole NAR settlement and all that stuff, right? It was basically ambulance chasing lawyers, and the end result is probably not good for buyers or sellers or anybody except for the lawyers. Having said that, however, we're in a new period of time. It's disruptive. And the way we've been doing business is not exactly the way we're going to be doing business. And the result is going to be that many agents, some agents, are going to drop out of the business. It's possible that some brokers are going to drop out of the business because real estate agents, as a general rule, don't like change. And I watched an agent that was doing relatively well retire because they changed the MLS software. And he didn't want to learn new MLS software. And so he said, well, that's time for me to go. Right. So that's going to be expected. Now, by September, it's very likely that things will be smoothed over and we'll know what we're doing. There's this phrase that you can hear among real estate pundits about survive until 25, because the number of people that want to buy or sell real estate isn't necessarily going to go down. Right. And in fact, if interest rates drop a little bit and other things happen, it could go up substantially. Generally, when the market is down, it goes up. And then when the market is up, it goes down. And it keeps going through that cycle on and on and on and on. So if the market is down and people are saying, oh, the market is down, nothing is working, they've made changes, I'm going to quit, that's great. Because stick in there, the market's going to pick up. And then the tide will rise and there'll be business to be done. And the people that are still in the business are going to still be in the business. Now, tomorrow, I'm going to be talking about the buyer representation. I know some of you have said you've done this before. I've added some parts to it, more on the aspect of the representation, signing it, and how much to charge, and some examples of that. That's going to be tomorrow. But today, I wanted to talk about open houses because that's still a good way to meet clients, buyers and sellers, and also to go over some very specific scripts and or strategies for what to do at the open house under the new rules. That's the idea. Now, I've shared a document which doesn't look like that, but looks kind of like this. And some of you that are on my team have already heard me talk about things like this, but I'm sorry, you're going to hear it again. Now, in terms of how do you get an open house, not only does the California Department of Real Estate say this, the California Association of Realtors say this, but EXP says this, which is you should only be doing open houses for your broker. Now, that would mean that you shouldn't be doing open houses for other brokers. And partly the new rules with the National Association of Realtors is that if you're holding an open house, by default, you're doing it for the benefit of the seller. And you're not actually doing it for the benefit of the buyer until the buyer starts asking you questions and you start answering them, and you're going beyond letting them walk around the open house. I talked about that a little bit yesterday about what constitutes when you're actually working with a buyer. Answering questions about other properties, giving them suggestions, talking about disclosures, talking about market value, all that sort of stuff. And we're going to go through those scripts. So the best way to find open houses is for you to go into your MLS. And let me just cover this, because what this is what I hear. I hear I can't get in the open houses. I hear that. And, and so I said, well, what are you doing? And the agent says, well, I've gone on Workplace and I typed in, I'm available to do open houses, and no one called me. All right. So that's, by the way, is the least amount of effort. I guess the least amount of effort is to do absolutely nothing and just hope somebody calls you and asks. But as a practice, that's the least amount of effort, is saying I'm open to doing open houses. Second, I hear, well, I go into Workplace and I look for agents that are posting they need help with an open house. Now, several members of my team are doing open houses right now because they saw somebody post something and they said, I'll do it. And they ended up doing the open house. That's a little more proactive. It means you have to be in Workplace. And by the way, you can use your phone, it's Facebook really. But still, that's not the best practice. The best practice is that you go into your MLS. And it's all of us, we don't all use the same software. In some areas, we're using Matrix. In some areas, we're using Paragon. And in some areas, we're using Flex. And in some areas, we're using Rapatoni. And there's others. But those that I just mentioned are the major ones used in California. The process is a little bit different, but not that different. And what the process would be is for you to create a search in the areas you're interested in. If you don't want to do condos because they're a pain to do an open house, because if they have a gate and then somebody has to be at the gate to let people in, and you need two people to do the open house, and who gets to stand in the open house and who has to be at the gate, and do you switch off? It's complicated, right? So you might say, well, I only want to do single family homes and townhomes. You set up a search and you can add in any of those MLS programs, you can add search criteria. And the search criteria you want to add is the name of the listing broker. And you don't necessarily, most of them, I have to admit, I've never tried Flex, but most of them are software I'm familiar with. You can put in eXp Realty. And any eXp Realty listing that shows up will come up in that search. Right, so you create a search for eXp Realty listings in the area you're interested in. And then you tell the program that you want to be notified immediately, not once a day or that sort of thing, immediately, whenever a listing comes up that's listed by eXp Realty in the area, price range, or whatever you want to do open houses. And then when you get the email, you immediately contact the listing agent. I've told this story about, whenever I have I don't like to do I don't do open houses, right? Even if I had a listing down the street, I wouldn't do the open house. And when I get a listing, the first agent from eXp that contacts me is who gets to do the open house. If you're the first agent that contacts the listing agent, your chances of doing the open house are pretty good because you're paying attention, you're trying, you obviously saw the property. Now I'm getting a lot of questions, I think. Am I getting a lot of questions? And yeah, people are basically asking, give me the handout. All right. So one of the things, let's say you really wanted to pump this up, right? You really wanted to. What that would mean, and this could be done by text or email, and I have a sample email, is that if you communicate to the listing agent how you do open houses, you tell the listing agent, this is what I do in an open house. I will be early to the open house. I'm going to put out at least 4, 6, 8. How many open house signs do you have? I'm going to have a sign-in sheet. I'm going to have professional marketing materials. I'll have booties for people to wear if that's something that they want. By the way, title companies oftentimes will give you free booties, or you can buy them. I'm going to make sure that the lights are on and everything is drapes are open. I'm going to do a professional open house. I'm going to have done a market analysis. I'm going to know what's available. I'm going to know what the comps are. I'm going to know about the neighborhood. I'm going to know about the schools. I'm going to be ready. And then one of the most important things to communicate to the listing agent is before I leave. First of all, when I leave, I'll make sure that the doors are locked and the windows are closed, and I'm going to leave the property the way I found it. I'm going to take my flyers, I'm going to take my stuff, everything will be cleaned and gone. But the most important thing that the listing agent is going to want to hear is before I leave the open house, I'm going to tell you what happened. I'm going to text you. I'm going to tell you how many couples came through, how many individuals came through, how many groups came through, how many agents came through, what the reaction was of the people that were at the open house. I'm going to tell you before I go. Because as a listing agent, I've had agents that did open houses and they just left the open house, and I'm trying, the seller's on me, tell me what happened at the open house. Was it busy? How did it go? And the agent who did the open house is ghosting me, isn't replying to text messages, doesn't answer the phone. And after an hour or two, I just made up something to say to the seller because I couldn't get the agent to tell me what happened at the open house. Now, do you understand that agent never did an open house for me again? So if you want to get more open houses, because if you do a good job and that listing agent is happy, they'll contact you next time and say, hey, I got another listing. Do you want to do an open house? If the listing agent says, I got it covered for the weekend, ask them if it's possible to do an open house during the week. Friday, twilight, or around lunchtime, or when people come home from work, why not? Right? If it's vacant, the seller's not even going to care. But even if it's not vacant, the seller might say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And the worst that could happen is that nobody shows up, but you still might sell the house. So there's even a little email that you could use, but you get the idea. Promise them that you're going to do a good job. A thorough job, and tell them what you're going to do. So a system and script. Now, as my communication with the listing agent assumed, is that you're going to know stuff about the open house, about the neighborhood, about the property. I can remember it was a long time ago. I thought let me do this. It was a long time ago. Pageless. Okay. All right. I don't know why there's a page break. But I worry about the wrong things. There we go. So it was one of the first open houses I ever did. And I showed up late, right? Because I was late and I was putting up the signs and it was late. And I was in a hurry and there was people waiting, and I opened the door and I let them in. And one of them said to me, so how many bedrooms does this house have? And I said, a 3. So I'm walking through them. Here's bedroom number 1. Here's the second bedroom number 2. My God, there's a bonus bedroom, apparently. There were 4 bedrooms. I didn't know how many bedrooms the house had. And people were saying, well, how old is the house? I don't really know. Right. What schools, what's the elementary school? I don't know. Is this a good I don't know. Right. You understand, you want to know all that stuff. You want to know all the relevant details about the property that somebody might ask if they're at an open house. Now, under the new rules, where your goal is to get somebody to want to hire you to be their agent, can you understand if you don't know the schools and you don't know how old it is and you don't know basics about the HOA and you don't know anything other than you showed up and you opened the door and you have a flyer, they may not be motivated to hire you. That's my theory, right? But the better job you do, the more you seem to know. You know about the other ones that sold, you know about days on market, you know about the schools and the school rankings. If they've got a termite property, you've read them. And by the way, I've learned that my 4.0 of ChatGPT is actually pretty good at summarizing a property inspection, termite inspections and things like that. But you might want to know what is possible to know about the property so that you look professional and competent. Elena, question.
Yes, where do we find that information?
What information?
What you're talking about, like the termite, the inspections, etc.
So the listing agent, if the first, in the MLS, there's often a disclosure link. Now, depending upon where you're at, that will have more or less information. Now, in San Diego, some of them have everything. The house I sold in Carlsbad, they had everything. They had a termite, a property, a roof, they had a pool, they had a pool inspection, they had everything, but not always. In Silicon Valley, 90% of the listings have everything. So do they have a disclosure link? If they do, click on it and read the disclosures. If they don't have a disclosure link, then you would ask the listing agent, do you have any disclosures? Inspections, reports, you got anything? And they either do or they don't. Do they have
In San Diego MLS, we have, I would say 99% of the time, zero disclosures.
I've heard that. But so then you would say, so you don't know about termite property inspections. And if somebody says, do you have a home inspection? Do you have a termite inspection? The answer is no, right? 90% of the time in San Diego, the seller doesn't do it. But when you buy a house in San Diego, there's a contingency for inspections, investigations, reports, and all that. It's your due diligence. And I'll make sure that we get all the necessary inspections and reports. Right. Does the seller have a transfer disclosure statement, an AVID, and an SPQ? Now, by the way, having conversations with buyers that show that you've got strategy is actually a good thing. And if I'm on a buyer consultation with you guys, I'm going to be different in San Diego than San Jose. And the difference is in San Jose, 90% of them at least have all the inspections and reports. That you might think is great for the buyers. That's not why the listing agent and the seller did it. They did not do it to help the buyer. They did it so that they could get the buyer to buy without an inspection contingency. That's why they do it, because they're pushing for non-contingent offers. Right. And so if you don't have an inspections, you don't have a termite report, you don't have a property inspection, you don't have any of that stuff, then the seller isn't going to be expecting non-contingent offers because they don't have all the inspections and reports, which means that the buyer can enter into a contract with a get out of escrow free card in their pocket. Because the inspection contingency in the RPA says that the buyer's acceptance of the condition of the property and any other matters affecting the property are a contingency of this agreement. That's literally what it says. That means any reason you've decided you don't like to buy the house, you can back out. And some of you may have heard me say this to buyers. It means that we could make an offer without a loan and without an appraisal contingency. Well, what if it doesn't appraise? Don't worry. We have an escape hatch. We'll say there's something wrong with the HOA. We'll say the school rankings are too low. We'll say there's, bicycle thieves in the neighborhood. And we want out and you'll get your money back. All right, does everybody understand? It's a big mistake for a seller not to get those inspections and reports. It doesn't save them money. It means that the buyer can now extort concessions from them in the middle of escrow because they got a get out of escrow free card. All right. Any questions about that? More than you may have wanted. Have a sign-in sheet. I refer to it later. Have marketing materials. It should be cleaned and staged. There's a greeting script. Hi, my name is Mike. I'm a real estate agent with eXp Realty. Zyla has a question. What's your question?
Mike, it's not related to the topic we are having, but it's about open house. Earlier you said we only can do now open house from EXP. If you're EXP agent, you cannot do from other brokerage. Is it true?
Yeah, it says that it's, yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right.
It's mandatory now.
Yeah, it's now, let's say, yes.
Okay, thank you.
So, hi, my name's Mike. I'm with eXp Realty. Welcome to the open house. Can I have your name? Great. Nice to meet you. Thanks for coming today. Could you sign in? The seller has requested that all visitors sign in. Now, those of you that have heard me talk about this, sometimes I would push for it, sometimes not. It's generally, I would say, probably a standard practice to ask him to sign in. You could either use the sign-in forms that you can get from the marketing center that have eXp branding on them. You could use the more complicated CAR form. Yes, Isla, another question?
No, I didn't raise my hand. Sorry.
Oh, it looks like somebody did. So Michael, is that your hand up too?
Yes.
All
I
right.
have a quick question for you. So I thought I was smart and I was like, no, people want to sign in. And after so many illegible sign-ins with trying to use Google Gemini to read it and a medical professional to read it and myself, and I still couldn't figure out what it said, I think I'm going to go for the app. But my question is, KV Core seems to struggle with finding a listing outside of my MLS.
Correct.
So I'm doing a CRMLS property on Saturday, but it can't find the listing for me to be able to use the KV Core open house. Is there another way to do it?
Yeah. So, and I figured out why this wasn't letting people do it. It took me a little while, but I created a Google form. I used to use Google Forms instead of KV Core. And it was a sharing setting that I found that was the issue, which I believe has been corrected. And so I made a Google form. And what I said on the Google form, and I'm giving you guys a copy, is I would have them sign in and ask them some questions, but this is in my don't have them sign in right away, right? That's the other option. And what I would do is I wouldn't have them sign in right away, but I would go through building rapport, right? Asking questions, giving them some reasons to talk to me. And the goal is to get an appointment. This is even more today than it was back in the old days when I was doing this, the old rotary phone days. And that's because the buyer is going to need a buyer representation arrangement with a real estate agent to tour properties that are not being held open. And the agents need to have a signed representation agreement. Buyers need an agent if it's not an open house, because somebody has to be showing them the property, and that requires a buyer representation agreement. So the focus of the open house is to get an appointment to talk about that. And so, but the other things I would say is, first of all, if they have inspections and reports, which may not be in San Diego, but in some areas they do, I would ask the buyer, well, we've got copies of all these inspections and reports. Are you interested enough that you want to see them?
So I have from the property management company the projections on long-term rental and short-term rental net investment amount. So I guess I could use that as a lead magnet, right? Say,
well, the other one is the most effective one is to say, well, are you interested in getting the best deal possible? Are you serious about buying a house? Right? Well, I assume if you're serious about buying a house, you like to get the best deal possible when you buy the house. And as you may know, the best deals are usually not the ones that are in the multiple listing service. They're not on Zillow and Redfin and Realtor.com because everybody knows about those properties. The best deals, the good buys, are usually off-market properties. And now EXP has this huge exclusive property network. There's notices of default, there's targeted neighborhoods, there's
Michael, how do you get to EXP exclusives? I tried the other day and I clicked on a few links and I couldn't find it.
all right. So the software, which you can download on your phone, is called ZenList. But if you type in EXP exclusives,
Okay, I was looking in the App Store for EXP.
right? Well, it's
look
called
for
ZenList. But
Okay,
if you go to if you Google search EXP exclusives, you're going to see ZenList. We don't call it ZenList because ZenList is something that everybody could download. It doesn't necessarily have our listings.
gotcha.
We call it EXP exclusives. And this is part of my buyer representation. And it says it's powered by ZenList. So what I would say to people is, are you interested in off-market listings? Those are the really good deals. Those are the ones you can buy without competing with other agents, right? And there's a list of them, right? There are expired listings and for sale by owners and new home subdivisions, and there's office exclusives. We have this huge network of exclusive listings. There's pre-foreclosure properties, probates. There's a whole bunch of them. And are you interested in that? And if they say, well, yeah, that sounds great, I'd like to see properties, because you understand if it's on Zillow, this is part of the conversation you have to have, and I put it into the script. If you're using Zillow and going to open houses, you're never going to get a great deal. You're not, because the good ones that are on the MLS are sold before the weekend, and you're not going to see them. And if you don't have an agent with a lockbox key that will let you in during the week, it's going to be hard for you to see them at all. But they'll be gone by the time Saturday and Sunday runs around. And the ones that aren't on Zillow and Redfin that everybody knows about are where the really good deals. This is what investors are looking for. This is what professional buyers are looking for. Are you interested in having me set up a search and show you those properties? Are you interested? Would you like that? And when they say, well, yeah, I'd really like that. Great. Here, fill out the form. And I would take my Chromebook with me and I'd have that form up. And you have to keep the link. You don't want to modify your existing form, but in the form, there's a link that gives them the preview link. And I would have a picture of the house and I'd have the address of the house and a description of the house and that sort of stuff. But I would pull it up on my little Chromebook and I would have them type in their information. Now, at this point, they're telling me the truth because I'm going to send them something that they want, off-market properties. Where can you get off? I've just mentioned the list. I made a video on this and I'm going to be going through it again. It's part of the buyer representation that we can do this, but and by the way, one of the advantages EXP agents have is we have a huge exclusives list. We have one.
Can I ask you a question over here, Michael?
Say that again. I don't know what the question is.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, you just did.
Okay, so my question is that you're sending your client that information, but you want to have a client sign a contract with you. How do we handle that kind of situation? Because
I didn't say I was just going to email it to them without an agreement. I simply said, would they like information on off-market property?
Mm-hmm.
And then my goal of this at this point is to get them to fill out the form and give me their contact information for real. That's the goal.
Thank you.
Right. The goal is not to distribute information to them, but to make an appointment to talk to them about buying off-market properties, as well as other strategies for negotiating a good deal and getting them to sign a buyer representation agreement. This was my strategy for getting them to tell me the truth about who they were. All right. So when I was doing this, I didn't even bother with this. I actually had people say, do you have a sign-in sheet? You know, where do I sign in? And I would give them a form and then they'd sign in because they wanted to for some reason. But most of the time I was simply going for an appointment. Or this would be, give me your information and I'll follow up with you. All right. Any more questions about that?
I have a question.
Yay.
Yay. So I have a live conversation I'm having with the listing agent right now for the open house that I'm doing. And I asked him about if he had any disclosures, and he said, I typically ask my sellers to fill them out once in escrow, but I can have my TC request them now if they are important to you and your efforts. Should I ask for them?
Not necessarily.
Did you say-
That
Oh.
listing agent is not doing their seller a good service. Right, they really aren't. Because the residential purchase agreement says that the buyer has 5 days from receipt of the seller documents to decide if they want to buy the house or not. The California Civil Code says that the buyer has 3 days from receipt of a transfer disclosure statement to decide if they want to buy the house. The seller property questionnaire is referenced in the RPA, and it says that they have 3 days. I think it repeats that number from when they get the SPQ. Now, there's a part of the RPA that says any cancellation of the contract has to be done in good faith. In other words, however, that does not apply to the transfer disclosure statement. The transfer disclosure statement is a statutory form, and it says the buyer can back out 3 days from receiving it for any reason they want to. The only exception to that is that if you give the buyer the TDS and the SPQ and the AVID and all of that before they make an offer, if you give all of those disclosures before the buyer makes the offer, then it's assumed that the buyer's offer is made with the understanding of the contents of those documents, and they get no days to back out because they've already received them. So what that agent is doing by waiting until we're in contract and then filling out the forms, it's giving the buyer a chance to back out. And so what if the buyer is saying, well, there's 2 or 3 homes we kind of like. Could we make offers on all of them? In San Diego, I would say, go ahead. Well, what if they're accepted? Don't worry. You can cancel any of those contracts just about whenever you want to. First 5 days, you can cancel. No reason has to be you can just cancel. See, you can't do that in Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley, you'll lose your deposit because they already did all this and they've done it up front. One of my agents down in San Diego was explaining to me that we don't do this in San Diego. And so she sold a condominium, and the buyer did not have a loan contingency and did not have an appraisal contingency, but had the inspection contingency because they didn't have anything, because we don't do that in San Diego. And then the appraisal came in $70,000 under the price. And now the buyer is saying, we're going to back out because we don't like the HOA documents. It limits our pets to 2. And they said, well, what could we do to keep this deal together? And the buyer said, lower your price 50 grand. Now, everybody knew they were doing it because of the appraisal, not because of the pets. There was nothing the seller could do. They had to lower their price $50,000. In that case, it cost the seller 50 grand that they didn't bother to get all the disclosures together up front. So it's an expensive lesson. But I know they still don't do that in San Diego. But so if they don't have this stuff and you're representing the buyer, you can get away with a lot more than you could in Silicon Valley because they rope them, tie them, brand them. You can't wiggle out, right? You have to remove your contingencies when you make the offer.
Okay, so in other words, hosting the open house and hoping to find buyers that I can represent, I don't necessarily
So
need
this
to.
is a good thing. Tell them you heard what I said. Tell them, look, this is a good thing. Right.
Okay.
This is a good thing because it's going to give you the ability to negotiate in the middle of the escrow.
Okay.
Right.
And then, however, if I'm the listing agent, then I should.
If you're the listing agent, you should have me talk to them about why they should get a property, a termite, and everything filled out in advance.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. So, great questions that you would ask. Are you from the neighborhood or are you out looking at houses to potentially buy? First question. All right. If they're from the neighborhood, that means they are probably owners of homes that are checking out the competition. That's a different conversation than somebody who's looking to buy. By the way, you don't need to buy a representation agreement because they're not buying. Just so you also understand that EXP will not pay you if you don't have a buyer representation agreement in the time frame necessary, which means once you're showing the property. That doesn't mean during the open house necessarily, but if you're starting to show other property, or certainly before you write an offer. CRMLS down in your guys' area, it says that if you mess up their rules regarding buyer representation and compensation to buyer's agents, they'll fine you $2,500 without a warning. I'm just saying. So, but if it's a seller, if somebody says, well, no, we're not really looking to buy, we have a house we just thought we'd see what they did. Hey, that's not a buyer. You know, you don't need an agree, you know, that's a potential listing. What kind of property? These are my block of questions that I would always ask. What kind of property are you looking for? How long have you been looking? How many, by the way, I usually do how many homes have you seen before? What has prevented you? But I was in a hurry. You know, for those of you that are like me, I would just do this. Let me just, right. How many homes have you seen? What prevented you from buying one? Are you working with an agent yet? I have a little more of the scripts on that. If they say yes, you say, oh, so you have like an exclusive kind of arrangement, you've signed a representation agreement. Do you currently rent or you own? Have you been pre-approved by a lender? Have you met with an agent to discuss strategies for getting the best deal possible when buying a home? That's where we're going with the open house. An appointment to discuss strategies. Do I need to look at the, all right, do I need to look at any of that? I don't know. Information gathering, right? The other script. Based upon you, I can give you a list of homes on the market, detailed neighborhood information, school statistics. Is that something you'd be interested in? But it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to send it to them without an appointment. Right. But if they say yes, I would like you to send. By the way, you don't need a buyer representation agreement to simply send them a list of homes. Right. It's very clear that you setting up an MLS search does not mean you're actually working for the buyer yet. It's when you're giving them analysis of properties and negotiation and, you know, what are the properties worth. If they say, well, yeah, I might be interested in that, great, you'd get their information. Again, you could use either my program, you could use the KV Core program, you could have them sign in, but I didn't like, people would write either in such a way you couldn't read it, or they would write things that I could read that I knew were not real email addresses, right? Because it included too many profanity to be a real email address. So when they're touring the home, my approach to touring the home was to say, well, go ahead. You know, it kind of depends on how many people are there. But let's say a couple come in, it's just the two of them. I would say, go ahead, you know, take your time, look around. If you have any questions, let me know. Now, you might think that since I said that, I was going to leave them alone. I wasn't really going to leave them alone. I was going to walk with them. Now, if I haven't asked them these questions before, because they just walked in, notice this is kind of similar to those other questions. This other block and that block are kind of similar. I was running out of time. But as I'm walking around with them, I would say, so what kind of property are you looking for? You know, what was it about this one that caught your eye? Oh, it says in the, you know, in Zillow, you've got dog kennels in the back. And we got a lot of dogs. And so we're looking for a house with dog kennels. Really? That's great. How long have you been looking for a house with dog kennels? Oh, we've been looking for, you know, a couple of weeks now. Great. Have you seen very many houses with dog kennels? Oh, we saw a couple of them, yeah, so far. Well, why haven't you bought one? Now, my reason for asking these questions, by the way, is to find a problem. Because if people don't have problems, they don't need our solutions. The 4 steps in making any sale is build rapport, qualify, which means to ask questions and uncover problems. Show, which means to demonstrate or show people how we could solve their problems. And 4 is to close, which is to get a decision to do something, like make an appointment. So if they told me that they, why haven't you bought one? Well, we saw several of them that looked nice, but they were already pending, or they went under contract by the time we moved, or we never found. So you understand they're having a problem. Do you currently rent or do you own? If you had a chance to talk to a lender and find out how much you can be pre-approved. Oh, you see, now that's an important thing if you haven't done that, because having not only a pre-approval, but having the right kind of pre-approval can save you thousands of dollars when you buy the house, because it strengthens your negotiation ability. Has anyone ever shared with you a strategy for getting the best deal possible when buying a home in a market like we're in today? Have you ever done that? Had like a little meeting where they could go over what's the best way to accomplish this in the market? Well, really, no, you might want to start with that, because in the market we're in today, having a strategy is necessary. Just to buy anything, to get a good deal, you're going to need a good strategy. So what I suggest, we take a few minutes and maybe go through that. When would be a good time for you? Are weekdays or weekends better for you? Weekends, okay, great. Saturday or Sunday, which of those two would you say generally works better? Saturday, all right. Morning, afternoon, what's the best time for you on Saturday morning? Would you say 9 or 10 or 11 or 10 o'clock? Okay, so why don't we set up, we'll have a quick meeting Saturday morning, 10 o'clock. How about that? So here, let me put it in my calendar, because, I'll forget if I don't, don't write down everything, So I got us down for Saturday at 10 o'clock. What's your names? What names can I put in here? All right, great, Now I'm going to be emailing you some information in advance, so it'll make our time go much quicker. What's the best email? Okay, great, got that. And just in case something comes up and I need to reach you and I need to text you, what would be the best number to text you at? Okay, thank you. So my system, which was somewhat contradictory to what a lot of people would teach, my system, I would say the goal of the open house is not to get people's names, email addresses, and phone numbers. It's not the goal. The goal is to get an appointment. And if you get an appointment, now they're more likely to tell you their names, their phone numbers, and their email addresses. And by the way, they don't always show, right? They don't always keep it. You need to follow up. All right. After touring, can you envision yourself living here? I sometimes would ask people, what do you think? You want to buy it? Just why not, right? I've had people say, yeah, I think we would. Great. Let's talk about that. If they say, no, well, it's missing this, it's missing that. Now, by the way, part of your research should be, you should know if people are going to your open house, what price range and area roughly would match that open house. If there are other open houses that would be in your area, you're going to want to at least, if you can, preview them in the morning before your open house. At least look at it on the MLS so that you can discuss what's going on in the neighborhood. This is going to make it a lot easier to get people to hire you to be their agent, that you actually seem to know what's going on in the real estate market. Buyer representation. I want to make sure you're aware of some recent changes in the industry. New guidelines require buyers to have a representation agreement with an agent to tour properties and receive assistance with evaluating and negotiating on a property. Have you signed a buyer representation agreement with an agent yet? No. If they say yes, then I would say, well, I don't want to interfere, and talk to somebody else. No, well, that's perfect. I'd love the opportunity to interview for the position of being your realtor. It's an old line, right? I want to interview for the position of being your realtor. In this competitive market, it's essential to have a solid strategy to get the best possible deal on the home. If your strategy is just going to open houses and looking on Zillow or similar sites, you might miss out on the best deals. Often the good deals are sold before the open house even happens. To see those properties and get the inside track on great deals, you need an agent who can show you properties before they hit the market and negotiate effectively on your behalf. Would you be interested in a short appointment to go over how this works and how to save money when buying a home? Any questions about that? Elena, was that a question or are you shading?
Yes, that's a question. Sorry, I had to switch screens.
That's okay.
Can you, when you have this short appointment, that's like like a short phone call, right? Or Zoom where you're just like, I'm always kind of confused at what happens in that first, like informal. I know this is not about that, but
Well, it is sort of, because they're going to say, well, what do you mean? And usually if you tell people it's going to be an hour, they don't want to meet with you.
mhm,
All right, if you tell them it's 15 minutes, they're more likely to. It would be good for it to be at least on Zoom or Google Meet or in person.
mhm,
The advantage of Zoom and Google Meet is that you could more easily get my assistance.
mhm.
Now, I'm not saying you couldn't do that in person, because I could have a Zoom call and be talking to you and have a screen. This isn't that difficult. But my scripts are probably better at this point.
Mhm.
Right, but then it's if we meeting face to face for many people might be better. See, it kind of depends on their personality style. Right, there are some personalities that really want to be, face to face. Others, however, are going to say, well, it's not really convenient. I don't, we don't really live around here. To drive, we may want to buy around here, but to drive and meet you at Pete's Coffee or something is kind of a hassle. Right, that's more of a commitment, but a quick Zoom call, not so much. Right, so it might be easier to close for that. And then the goal would be what I'm talking about tomorrow, which is to explain why they want to have an agent to represent them and how all of that works. So it's hard to say I could do this on the phone. Zoom would be better, or Google Meet. When you become smooth at it and you're already close to them and they're the kind of friendly people that seem like they want to do it in person, then do it in person.
Okay, so that initial meeting, what is the focus of that is to talk about why it's important to have an agent represent you?
Well, you've heard me do this.
Yeah.
The goal is, so the way I would, and I might rearrange my stuff by tomorrow, but what I would say is, look at the goal. Let's just go through how to get the best deal possible when you're buying a home in a market like we're in today. All right, and the components of that, and by the way, one of the advantages of knowing local loan agents and local title companies is that many of them have office space, and the loan agent would love for you to bring your buyers and they'll talk to them too. Right, I'm just throwing that out. It's an alternative to the coffee shop, but I found it easier to get people to go to their coffee shop. Because I'd ask people, I would say to people, so what's your religion? And they'd say, what? I mean, are you Pete's, Starbucks, Phil's, or are you, some fringe, group? And people would laugh. And I've had people say they wanted to buy a home within walking distance to Pete's Coffee. I've had that. Right. And then people would laugh and they would say, well, Starbucks, Pete's, great. I bet there's one you go to where you work, or let's meet there. Right? Let's meet there. See, now this is a relatively easy sale because they go there every day anyhow. Right. It's close. They know where it is. They feel comfortable there. They know what their drink is. And then, so that was an easy thing to do, I found. And I met a lot of people at that. So now what we're there, I'd say, look at the goal is, first of all, and I have questions for a buyer consultation. I've done that class, but you'd basically want to find out what their urgency is and what their commitment is. Why are you looking to buy a home at this time? What made you decide to buy a home at this time? If it was a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 meaning we've got to buy as soon as we can, and 0 meaning we really don't want to, but people are pushing us to, where would you, I mean, you know, how committed are you to doing this? And if they say, well, we're really committed, this is my, are you serious question? And they're like, yes, we really want to do it. We've been thinking about it. This is why we want to do it. You know, great. So you're serious about buying a home. I assume you would like to get the best deal possible when you're buying a home. Everybody would, right? So let's talk about how to do that. First step is you need to talk to at least 3 lenders, and you need to get pre-approved. Because if you aren't pre-approved, most sellers aren't even going to talk to you. And if you are pre-approved, you're in a stronger negotiating position, and the level of pre-approval might dictate that. And you've heard me say this, if there were 2 offers and they were both 800,000 and one of them was a pre-approved buyer and the other one wasn't, which offer would the seller take? Well, they would take the one from the pre-approved buyer. Well, let's say the one that isn't pre-approved was 800,000, but the pre-approved buyer was only 790. Which one is the seller going to take? They might still go with the pre-approved buyer. So in that case, pre-approval saved them $10,000. By having strong financing, you can literally save thousands of dollars when you buy a home. So you ought to talk to 3 lenders, you ought to talk to a bank, or if you're a credit union member, credit union, you ought to talk to a mortgage company. I have a suggestion on where to start. See, now that conversation isn't very confronting, right? You know, it's like, oh, that's a good idea. Yes, we need to do that, right? And if they've already talked to a lender, they ought to talk to 2 more. Second thing you need to, the second part of the strategy is to be exposed to all of the great deals that are on the market. Now, what that means is that some of them are in the multiple listing service, they're on Zillow, but don't wait until the weekend. And I'm going to be looking every day to see if anything comes on the market that fits what you're looking for. If necessary, I'm going to go check it out. I'll make a video and send it to you if that's what's needed. And if it matches, we want to go see it before the weekend, before the open houses. Can you do that? Would that work for you? Yeah, great. The other thing about getting the best deal is in exposure is that there are other properties that are not on Zillow. They're not on Redfin, but they still may be a good deal. They're new home subdivisions, expired listings, for sale by owners, EXP exclusives. There might be notices of default. We're going to look at those, and when I see something, I'm going to tell you about it so we can make arrangements to look at it if that's possible. How does that sound? All right, great. So one step in getting a good deal is exposure to the good buys. Second step in getting the best deal is negotiating the contract. There are 43 contract terms that can be negotiated in the contract used in real estate in California. And what you want is somebody that's helping you fill out those 43 terms that is on your side, which means not the listing agent, because the listing agent is obligated to get the highest price possible under the best terms possible for the seller. And one way to get a good deal is to have your own agent who's helping you with the process, who knows and understands what you're looking for, is committed to helping you find it, and is going to help you negotiate the best price possible under the best terms possible. How does that sound? See, what I'm doing is I'm going into the how to get a good buy, how to get the best deal. That's the context, and I'm doing it from the point of view of having an agent. Michael, do you have a question? Yes?
Yes, sorry. So quick question for you. If you've already qualified them and found out their commitment and motivation, and it's something to the effect of her brother's a real estate agent, or there's a barrier, or they're just very likely to be a dead lead, do you just burn that, or do you still put it in your CRM?
I would push it, maybe.
You think brother?
So I don't know how many of you have brothers and sisters. Do you like them? Do you trust them? Would you want them knowing your business? Not everybody does. So sometimes they mention that as a way of pushing you off as an agent. But they don't really want their brother to know all their financial information. They don't. But it's easy to say, I have a friend in the business. And you know what happens when people say to me, I have a friend in the business? I'd say, that's great. You know, in the market that we're in right now, you're going to need all the friends you can get. You know, you're going to need all the friends you can get. And I would just keep going, right? You don't have to, you can't change the fact that they know somebody. Who doesn't know somebody who's in real estate, you know? But is the brother full-time part, you know, what level of expertise does the brother? You see, one of the advantages about keeping family and business separate is because if I'm not doing the job you want, you can easily fire me. Our buyer representation agreement gives you the right to fire me just by giving notice. But what if your brother isn't doing a good job? I mean, think about it. You know, do you have to go to Thanksgiving dinner with them? Right? Are you going to be seeing them year after year? And maybe it would make more of a, this is a big investment. Right? Maybe the biggest investment you're ever going to make in your life. And, you know, if you were having heart surgery, would you say, well, my brother, you know, he's got his medical license, so I guess I'm going to let him do it. You know, I don't know. And although this might not be heart surgery level, but you understand having somebody that is professional and committed and has more resources and experience that you can keep at arm's length because they're not a family member or a friend, that might work out better. And if they're still stuck on it, then I'd let it go. But I've had people say, I have friends, I have relatives that have real estate licenses, but they dumped them. You'll all find, if you're in business long enough, that a friend of yours, a relative of yours, is going to buy or sell a house without you. You're going to find that happens. You last long enough. And then it'll hit you. No, they don't always go with a friend or somebody they know. All right. Well, when I heard, so other questions that I need to answer. What I was hoping to do, but we ran out of time. I don't know how come that always happens. It was to actually do some script practice on this. Next week, we're going to do some script practice on this. And I've even got some objections, and I even have a outline for holding open houses, which would be a class and a half all on its own. But what I want to do next week on Tuesday, we're most likely going to be doing the seller side of this, and that would mean the fund with forms from the seller's perspective. And as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking on the Atomic Habits podcast coming up on what do you say to a seller about compensating buyer's agents. But we're going to talk about that here first next Tuesday, and then we're going to be doing probably script practice on this and the seller side on Tuesday and Wednesday, assuming you guys want that and keep showing up. Any questions while I'm at this? You should study the scripts, practice saying them, practice the words so that when it comes time, you can actually articulate, you know, and I believe that this is going to start to shake out, and that maybe by September, this will be a new normal, but it'll be normal. Right. I've been through many changes in real estate. And what happens is some people leave the business because they don't like change. And then and then the market changes and picks up again, and the people that stuck with it are doing much, much better. And I believe that's where we're all going to be. All right, EXP is going to be doing script practice. EXP's is way ahead of this compared to other brokers. There's not a lack of information. And by the way, you need to figure out what your MLS is doing, because the MLSs are the ones that are enforcing all these rules. And it varies. San Francisco has a different set of rules than MLS listings or CRMLS. All right, are we good for now? I'm taking that as a affirmative. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.